Hi, everybody, and welcome back to English for You. I'm Pat.
And I'm Adam.
And we're on the second day of our article about Antoni Gaudi. He was an architect from Catalonia in Spain who had a big influence on Catalan modernism.
That's right. His unusual buildings and other works can be found all over Barcelona.
Now, Gaudi was often sick as a child, and in that time, he spent a lot of his time studying nature.
Yes, this inspired his designs, which use organic shapes, curved lines, and lots of bright colors and small details.
And these give his buildings a kind of dreamy appearance.
Park Güell has curved benches, round shapes, and all kinds of brightly colored tiles, as well as twisted columns that look like trees.
Yeah, it really is an interesting park to walk around. In part 2 of our article today, we're going to learn more about some of Gaudi's other buildings, all of which can be found in the city of Barcelona. Let's check out day 2.
Reading.
Welcome to Gaudi's Barcelona. Gaudi's Casa Mila is instantly recognizable because it looks as though it's been grown by nature itself. The wavy facades look like parts of a tree. This symbol of Barcelona was constructed in 1912 and has 2 blocks of apartments. Special features of the building include the extremely large windows and entries. It also surrounds 2 courtyards in the middle and looks like a figure 8. La Sagrada Familia is probably Gaudi's most expressive piece of public architecture. It's also likely the most famous. There's no denying that it looks impressive. Gaudi started to build this fancy church in 1882. But 140 years later, it's still not finished. In fact, it won't be finished until after 2026. Millions of people come to see La Sagrada Familia each year. The towers are designed to look like a forest, and the tallest tower is planned to reach 172.5 meters into the sky. If you ever decide to visit Barcelona, make sure to check out some of Gaudi's works. They look great in photos, but seeing them in real life will blow your mind.
Okay, everyone, let's get started. The first part of our article, or the first sentence of our article, states that Gaudi's Casa Mila is instantly recognizable because it looks as though it's been grown by nature itself. So we know he has a flair for nature, and he takes an inspiration from nature in all his buildings. But in this sentence, we see that word recognizable. So a recognizable is a word and it's an adjective. It is something that can be identified or known, usually immediately. You know that is something and you know who did it, and so forth. So for an example, we could say the Statue of Liberty is the most recognizable monument in New York.
Right. You don't go, what's that?
Exactly. You fly into New York and you're like, where am I? You see it.
There is the Statue of Liberty. You don't really mistake that for anything. So we said that this building looks as though it's been grown by nature itself. When we use the phrase as though, we mean the same as like, and we use it to make a hypothetical comparison. Of course, this is a building. It was designed. It was built, but it looks as though it had just grown out of the ground.
Right.
Okay, it didn't really, but that's the appearance it gives off. We could also say as if in this circumstance. It looks as if it's been grown by nature itself.
I think I remember my mom saying it looks as if you just got up when she would get home from work in the afternoon. And you're like, no, I was up since 8 o'clock. But my hair was maybe messy, so it looks as if or as though I just woke up.
Exactly.
Continuing with that, in the article, it says, the wavy facades look like parts of a tree. So in that sentence, we see the word wavy. Now, wavy is an adjective. It's curving in opposite directions, maybe having a series of curves in it. So again, it's not straight. It's not...
Like a circle.
Yeah, it's not a circle, but it's very bendy, maybe you could also say.
It goes back and forth and back and forth.
Right. And we could use for an example sentence, the girl doesn't have straight hair or curly hair. It's a bit wavy.
Yeah,
so
wavy's
like
a pretty, sort of popular style. It's not straight, it's not all curved up, but it kind of goes back and forth.
That's right.
So the part of this building that is wavy is the facade. Now, if you see the letter C with that tiny little tail underneath it,
right.
it's pronounced more like an S sound, facade, rather than facade. It's not a hard K sound, it's an S sound. So, and what it means is the front part of a building, the part of a building that looks out onto the street. In other words, the bit that's designed to be looked at by people.
Right,
It's not around the back where you deliver the food. It's not around the side where there's an exit door where you don't need to spend a lot of attention. The facade is the bit that you really design to look good because that's what you want people to see.
That's right, yeah.
So what is the Casa Mila?
What is the Casa Mila? Okay, well, jumping back to our article, this symbol of Barcelona was constructed in 1912 and has 2 blocks of apartments.
Okay, so just people live in them.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting, pretty unique to live in one of Gaudi's buildings. But in that sentence, we see the word construct, which is a verb. It means to build something or put something together from different parts. So as a kid, you probably, maybe built something in your backyard. But we can say, for an example, the children are trying to construct a huge Lego castle.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I did that when I was a kid. So
Yep.
construct and build go kind of simultaneously together.
Yeah, it's a similar kind of meaning to it. So it's just saying this symbol was constructed, it was built in 1912. It has 2 blocks of apartments. But as you'd imagine, for anything that was designed by Gaudi, they're not just normal apartments.
Yes, it's going to look kind of
different.
Very different.
That you wouldn't find many of these elsewhere in the city. Okay, so what do we learn about these apartments, these kind of buildings? The article says special features of the building include the extremely large windows and entries. And this makes me think of our chat question yesterday. I mean, would you want to live in this building if it has really big windows?
Right.
That might be good, but not all the time. You might lose a lot of heat that way.
Yeah, and maybe people are watching you from somewhere
across the street.
Yeah.
And it's got extremely very large windows and entries. Here we're using the word entry to mean the same as entrance. It's a way into somewhere. It's how you get into this place. Often an entry is also the way out, but generally we use it to mean the way in. Certain places, parks or buildings might have an entry that is not also an exit. You can only go in that way. Here's an example sentence. The snake crawled through the narrow entry to its hole in the rocks.
Oh, no. Okay, jumping back to our article, it continues to say, it also surrounds 2 courtyards in the middle and looks like a figure 8.
That's definitely sounding like a weird kind of,
Right, a building to
here.
live in, right?
Yes.
So in that sentence, we see courtyard, and courtyard is a noun. It is an area of flat ground outside that is partly or completely surrounded by the walls of a building. So usually if you're going to a big apartment complex, you walk through the entry, like Pat said, and then sometimes they'll have like maybe a garden or a place to sit and eat lunch, and that would be your courtyard. So we could use an example sentence as, the students came into the courtyard to eat their lunch.
Right. Almost all the schools I've been to in Taiwan, they're designed with sort of 4 big walls around a courtyard where there's trees, little garden areas, places to sit, that kind of thing. So this particular building looks like a figure 8. So when we use figure in this way, we tend to mean a shape, especially when we're using the shape in a decoration or a design. And when we talk about a figure 8, we mean an 8 shape, the shape of the number 8, a long loop that forms 2 circles. You guys know what an 8 looks like.
Right.
So you'll often see particularly old designs of clothes might have different sort of figures and shapes and patterns on. Same with a lot of buildings. Temples will have different figures on. So we could say the wall of the old temple was covered in pictures of animals and other interesting shapes and figures. So that's the Casa Mila, which is one pretty interesting and unusual building.
Right, there is.
It almost looks like a sort of a fairy kind of set of houses, right?
Right.
You imagine this is the sort of thing you'd see in like a Final Fantasy video game.
You're right. And the colors of it still hold up after all these years on that building.
They're all bright and interesting. They're not just like grey walls, just like, a normal apartment. You have to see these to believe these.
Exactly. Well, jumping back, let's continue with our article. It says, La Sagrada Familia is probably Gaudi's most expressive piece of public architecture. So in that sentence, we see expressive, and it's an adjective. And what it means is showing what someone thinks or feels. So it's something that some people can do or a feeling that you might have if you experience something. For an example, you could say, these new robots have very expressive faces. They almost look like real people.
Exactly.
So they can move up and down. I know in Japan, they are doing a lot of new things with robots, so they have very expressive faces.
Yeah, what we mean by this sentence is this building, this La Sagrada Familia, it's a church, kind of means just the sacred family.
That's right.
It really does have all of Gaudi's kind of beliefs, feelings, ideas, inspiration. He put it all in this place and said, this is my masterpiece. This building has everything that I want to say through my architecture. So we learned that Gaudi was an architect in day one, someone who designs buildings. Architecture is the thing that's designed. When we talk about architecture, we mean complicated and carefully designed structures, usually a building. When we talk about a regular house or a block of apartment, that's not really architecture. It may have some features of design in it, but we're talking about things that have got a lot more careful touches, real thought about how everything is going to fit together as a single building.
That's right. And so in this La Sagrada Familia, it looks like the architecture is just jam-packed or to be packed with all his expressionist ideas and things of nature that he put into this one building. So, continuing with the article, it says, it's also likely the most famous. There's no denying that it looks impressive. Here, we have our language in focus. There's no denying that plus a noun clause. So we saw in that sentence, there's no denying that it looks impressive. So what we mean is, there's no denying that means it's very obvious and clear that something is true. So there's no question about it when you say there's no denying it. I could use an example sentence such as, since my cat always sleeps next to me every night, there's no denying that he loves me very much. Again, we are making sure that there's no question about my cat's love for me. There's no denying that. We can also use verbs like deny, tell, know, say, argue, explain, or predict. Another example sentence, for example, we can say is, Ryan hasn't made up his mind yet. There's no telling what he will do after graduating from high school.
Okay, let's get back to the article. We saw the word impressive in that sentence as well. If something is impressive, it makes you go wow because of its great qualities, its size, its appearance. It's just something that kind of stops you in your tracks as you're walking. And you go, oh, that really is cool. For example, we would say Taipei 101 is an impressive building that often makes people stop and stare. You could also talk about people giving an impressive acting performance or an impressive performance in a sports game. It's special and you would note it and go, that person did a really good job. It was impressive. I felt impressed, which is the other form of the adjective.
Right. Okay, everyone. Continuing with the article, it says Gaudi started to build this fancy church in 1882, but 140 years later, it's still not finished.
Yeah,
oh my gosh, it's still not done.
It's taken a while. There have been a lot of problems with building this building.
Well, in that sentence, we saw the word fancy. And fancy is an adjective. We use fancy to describe places or things that are expensive or fashionable or impressive, like Pat stated earlier. So, for an example, I could say my sister and her husband stayed at a fancy hotel when they traveled to Mexico last year. So it was very nice. Maybe it had great views. The building looked impressive and just fancy in general.
But it probably cost a bit more than a smaller, more regular hotel.
Exactly.
So yeah, this building is really fancy. And we see it's not been finished yet.
Right.
And the article says, in fact, it won't be finished until after 2026. So another 3 years at least. Because more could go wrong.
And even then, will it be 2026?
We'll have to wait and see.
The article continues by saying millions of people come to see La Sagrada Familia each year. So when we went there, there were crowds of people talking and taking pictures of it, even in February.
Yeah.
So even when it was cold, there was hundreds, if not thousands of people, trying to get snapshots and pictures of the building itself, of La Sagrada Familia.
Yeah, now I'm sure there'll be a picture of this in the magazine, so you can take a look. But we see in the article, the towers are designed to look like a forest. And the tallest tower is planned to reach 172.5 meters into the sky. So yeah, they're looking like the trees of a forest kind of poking up into the sky. I always kind of think of them as a little bit like candles that have melted.
You're right. That is a good...
That's what I get the impression of. But the top of this building is covered in these towers. Towers are very tall but not very wide buildings. And they could be buildings by themselves, or they could be just on top of other buildings, the bit that points up. They might be found at the corners of castles or different places. Taipei 101 is, of course, a tower.
You're right,
One very big tower. Of course, in New York, you had the famous Twin Towers, the two very tall buildings there. You might say, for example, there were flags flying from the tall towers of the castle.
Okay. Our article continues to say, if you ever decide to visit Barcelona, make sure to check out some of Gaudi's works. Here we see the phrasal verb check out. And basically, it means to see or to take a look. So for an example, when you go to their house, you need to check out the backyard. It's huge.
Wow.
They might have a pool, or you need to go and see it for yourself, or just see it.
Right. It's definitely something you'd use when you advise someone, hey, you got to check out this. Right. Check out this restaurant. It's great. That sort of thing.
Exactly.
The article adds, they, meaning Gaudi's works, they look great in photos, but seeing them in real life will blow your mind.
Oh,
exactly. Yep, this is a good idiomatic phrase. Kind of, it's slang, but it's slang that's pretty common these days. If something blows your mind, then it's impressive. It makes you go, wow, and think something is amazing. often to the point where you can't quite believe it. It's as if your mind is exploding because you can't quite accept something is real.
That's right, yeah.
So you could also use it as a compound adjective. You could say something blows your mind, or you could say it is mind-blowing.
That's right, yeah.
It was a mind-blowing movie. You watched it and you were just like, wow, I can't even think. What did I just see? That was so incredible.
We say that quite often, I know, in the States. So everything could be mind-blowing. You could even say, these cookies are mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's a pretty
good.
common phrase. So, follow that advice in our article conclusion. Go and check out Gaudi's buildings. See them for yourselves. It's definitely worth it. That's the end of our article, but we're not quite done yet. We're going to go now to our For You Chat question.
You chat.
Okay, everyone, welcome back for our For You Chat. We have a question for all of you. What are some interesting pieces of Taiwanese architecture?
That's a good question because a lot of the buildings you might see, some of them date back from the Japanese times.
That's right.
So they've got a Japanese style. Others have got older European styles. So what is a Taiwanese architecture? Is it some of the bigger buildings we've had right now? Do you count what's it called in Kaohsiung? The big tower that's like two towers with a tower on top in the middle.
Oh, yes. I forget the name of that. Yes.
Yeah, but the big one in Kaohsiung, that's quite unique because you've got a gap in the middle underneath.
Yes.
So that for me is, I always look at it and go, that's just different.
Right.
How about you? Any examples?
We've talked about Taipei 101. Obviously, everyone knows that. There is that one big one that's, I believe, red and a little bit yellow, and I think it's called the Grand Hotel, possibly.
Yeah, sure.
And that one is what you would consider as a pretty impressive architecture, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
We don't have that in the U.S., I know, something like that.
Right, for sure. And then you've got places like the Chiang Kai-shek Memorial Hall.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And then the national, the Opera House and the theatre that are in the same area. They're both really interesting pieces of architecture. They always seem to be under construction somewhere or somehow.
There's always something going on, yeah.
But then you could also go to places like the Dadao Cheng, like Dihua Street, the wharf, and see all those kind of old-style shopping buildings and stuff. That is also pretty interesting architecture because it's designed for people to live in, not just look at, kind of thing. So with the warehouses on top and the storefronts down below kind of idea.
Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. So for you guys, what do you think are some interesting pieces of Taiwanese architecture? Talk amongst yourselves, see what you think is the coolest or the best.
Exactly, but that's all we've got time for today. Thanks for listening, everyone, for English for You. I'm Pat.
And I'm Adam.
And we'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Vocabulary Review.
Entry. The entry to this building is a bit small, so please watch your head as you go through it. Figure. The walls of the school were decorated with letters, numbers, and similar figures. Expressive. Peter's guitar playing is so expressive. It's like you can hear his emotion in the notes. Impressive. The ancient people built a huge and impressive temple here and covered it in gold. Fancy. This hotel is so fancy. Look at all these beautiful lights and plants in our room. Tower. When Brian was looking out at the city, he saw a single tower that was much taller than the other buildings.
智慧小补帖
Wavy. Facade. Construct. Courtyard.
以上节目是由活用空中美语制作， 活用空中美语杂志，请洽询全国各大书店。如欲索取试听教材，请来电02-2364-4000 02-2364-4000，或上网查询，网址是 www.english4u.net www.english4u.net